Almost everything you've been told about how Ben Hogan practiced is wrong. The story everyone repeats is that the greatest ball striker who ever lived hit thousands and thousands of golf balls a day, that he beat his hands bloody on the range, that the whole secret was just relentless, punishing volume. Grind harder than everyone else, and you too can become Hogan. That's the myth. And the man himself said, near the end of his life, that it wasn't true. He said, and I'm quoting him, "You hear stories about my beating my brains in practicing, but the truth is I was enjoying myself. I couldn't wait to get up in the morning so I could go hit balls." He didn't hit thousands of balls. He didn't grind in misery. What Ben Hogan actually did on that range was something far stranger, far smarter, and genuinely learnable. And when you understand it, it changes how you'd practice anything. There's a real method here, and there's a real secret underneath the famous one that Hogan revealed exactly once in a room full of professionals, and that almost nobody talks about. So let's dig it out. How the greatest ball striker in history actually practiced, and the dark, sad reason he practiced that way at all. You've probably heard his famous line. When people ask Ben Hogan for the secret, he'd say, "The secret is in the dirt. Dig it out of the dirt." And everyone took that to mean one thing: hit more balls, practice more than the other guy. But watch what he actually did, because the details tell a completely different story. Hogan did not show up with a giant pyramid of range balls. He came out with a small shag bag of his own golf balls and a caddy. And he sent the caddy out into the field to stand and collect them. Now think about what that means. If you're hitting out of a small bag, you cannot mindlessly rake ball after ball and lash at them. You physically run out. You're forced to slow down. And the caddy standing out there in the field? Hogan was so accurate that the caddy barely had to move. The shots landed in a cluster around him, like they were on a string. And here's the part. That's the actual method. After every single shot, Hogan put the club back in the bag and started his entire routine over from the beginning. Every ball, he'd stand behind it, decide exactly what shot he wanted. A medium draw, a low fade, whatever. Pick a precise target. Not just the left half of the range, but a specific flag or sign. Take his setup, hit it, and then hold his finish. And watch the ball fly from start to landing, reading the shot. Then he'd look at the divot, and only then would he pull the next club. That's the opposite of grinding. That is one deliberate, complete, thought-out golf shot at a time. The same way you have to hit them on the course, where you never get to hit the same shot twice in a row. Modern coaches have a name for this now. They call it deliberate practice. And they'll tell you it's the single most effective way any human being learns any skill. Hogan was doing it 50 years before anyone gave it a name. He also practiced completely alone, with no distractions. And there's a small detail here I love. At a busy range, Hogan would go all the way to the far right end, to the very edge. Why? So that when he looked out at his target, there was no one in his field of vision. No other golfers moving, no swings to catch his eye. Just him, the ball, and the target. Total isolation, on purpose. And that points at the thing underneath all of it. The part of Hogan's practice that almost nobody knows about, because he wasn't only training his swing out there, he was training his mind. Hogan said it himself. "While I am practicing," he said, "I am also trying to develop my powers of concentration. I never just walk up and hit the ball." He treated focus as a skill you could build with reps, exactly like a swing. Hour after hour on that range, he wasn't just grooving a motion, he was teaching himself to enter a state of total concentration on command, to shut out the entire world and see nothing but the shot. That's where the ice in his veins came from. The Scots watched him win their Open at Carnoustie and nicknamed him the Wee Iceman because nothing seemed to touch him. That wasn't his personality, it was a trained skill. He'd built it, one focused ball at a time. He was, in a way, a scientist. He was one of the first golfers ever to assign a specific yardage to every single club in his bag. And then, to study a course and use the trees and the bunkers as reference points to know his exact distances. Everybody does that today. Hogan more or less invented it. His precision got so absurd that at the 1953 Masters, he hit the flagstick, the actual pin, on 2 straight holes, and then went and broke the tournament scoring record. That same year, he won 5 of the 6 events he entered, including the Masters, the US Open, and the only British Open he ever played. People just called it Hogan's secret. But here's the thing. Hogan told everyone his secret. Once. And they weren't listening. If you're enjoying this, the real stories behind the legends of this game are exactly what this channel lives for. And the next part is the one that reframes everything you just heard. In 1956, Hogan stood up in front of a room of about 500 professional golfers at a PGA event in Atlantic City, and for 50 minutes he told them, fully and openly, the true story of how he'd built his game. They sat there spellbound, and the golf writer covering it walked out and wrote something fascinating. He wrote that Hogan thought he was giving away some technical trick, some bit of club face manipulation. But what he'd actually revealed, without quite realizing it, was the real secret. And the real secret wasn't in the dirt at all. It could be summed up in a single word: logic. What the writer saw, listening to Hogan, was a brilliantly logical mind. A man who reasoned about the golf swing in a cold, orderly, systematic way, who tested every element and ruthlessly threw out anything that didn't fit a simple, repeatable pattern. That was the secret, not the hours, the thinking. Hogan got more out of practice than anyone else because he organized his reasoning first. He wasn't digging blindly. He was running experiments, forming a hypothesis, testing it, keeping what worked, discarding what didn't, and doing it more rigorously than any player alive. The secret is in the dirt was never really about the dirt. It was about the mind you brought to it. So that's the method. Small bag, full routine on every ball, total isolation, trained concentration, and above all, relentless logic. And you can start using every piece of that tomorrow. But there's a question sitting underneath all of this that we haven't answered, which is, why? Why would a man drive himself to build a mind like that? To isolate himself at the end of the range? To reason and test and grind with that kind of intensity? When, by his own account, other players had more natural talent? The answer isn't a golf answer. It's the reason this is more than a practice tutorial. Ben Hogan practiced like his life depended on it, because once it had. He was born in Texas in 1912, the youngest of 3 kids. His father, Chester, was a blacksmith, and he was a man being slowly crushed by history because the world was trading its horses for automobiles, and a blacksmith's trade was dying underneath him. Chester struggled with his health and with a deep depression, and when Ben was 9 years old, his father took his own life, with a gunshot, at home, with the family close by. Some accounts say young Ben was in the room. Whatever he saw or heard that day, it shattered the family's world. They fell into poverty. 9-year-old Ben went out to sell newspapers to help his mother put food on the table. And then he heard that boys could make 65 cents a round caddying at a country club 7 miles away. So he walked there, and he carried bags. And that is how Ben Hogan found golf. Not as a game, as a way to survive. And that changes how you see everything he did afterward. The loneliness, the coldness, the refusal to rely on anything he couldn't control. The need to reason every single thing out to certainty. The inability to trust talent, and the compulsion to trust only work. The Ben Hogan Museum puts it plainly. He was, in their words, very much a product of the tragedies in his life. The obsessive practice wasn't a training strategy he chose off a menu. It was who the accident and the poverty had forced him to become. And it showed up in his actual golf, too. Because Hogan was not a natural. This is another thing people forget. For the first 10 years of his career, Ben Hogan was cursed with a vicious hook. A shot that snapped hard left and wrecked his scores. He was small, 5'8", 145 pounds, and to hit it, far enough to compete, he used a strong grip. That made the hook even worse. He failed. He went broke on tour, more than once. He nearly quit the game entirely, because he could not control where the ball went. So all that practice, all that logic and isolation and deliberate repetition started as one desperate man, trying to fix one specific flaw. He reasoned his way to a weaker grip. He rebuilt his motion around it, and he turned the wild hook into the most controlled shot in golf, the gentle, reliable, left-to-right Hogan fade. He didn't practice like that because he was the most gifted. He practiced like that because he was terrified of the ball going left, and terrified of being poor again. And the only weapon he had against either fear was work. That's the real secret in the dirt, not the volume, the reason. And here's the last image, the one that tells you what kind of man this made him. Decades later, long after the car crash that nearly killed him had left his legs permanently damaged, Ben Hogan retired to a club in Fort Worth called Shady Oaks. He was in his 70s. His legs couldn't carry him around a full course anymore. But there was a small 9-hole course there, and a young woman named Chris Cheddar, a college golfer chasing an LPGA dream, used to see him out on it in the afternoons. He'd take a single 6-iron and drop 3 balls in his pocket. He'd walk a little way, stop, hit the 3 shots, gather them back up, and walk on. And when his ruined legs got too tired to hold him, he'd lean on that 6-iron and use it as a walking stick, and then keep going. An old man, barely able to stand, still out there alone, still hitting shots, still digging it out of the dirt. Because for Ben Hogan, that was never the price of greatness. It was the only place in the world he'd ever felt safe. So here's my question for you. We love to say greatness comes from talent. Hogan's whole life says the opposite, that it can come from fear and loss and the sheer refusal to stop working. So which do you believe really makes the difference, the gift or the grind? Tell me below. And one honest thing before you go, this channel is still small, closing in on its first 1,000 subscribers. And if the real stories behind golf's legends are what you want more of, subscribing genuinely helps get it there. That's the whole ask, just the once. Either way, stick around, because there are a lot more of these to tell.